Welcome everyone to the special joint meeting of the Pony Beach Town Council along with the Pony Beach Planning Commission, their regular meeting. I'm going to call the council to order at 5:32 p.m. All council members are present. The chair, would you like to?
Yes, I'd like to call the Planning Commission to order And also to let folks know that all the members are present with the exception of Steve Hale, who is out on work assignment out of town. The next thing I want to do is make a recommendation to consent change on the agenda. We have looked at our bylaws and determined that the length of service as officers serving on the commission is 2 years. And I've now been serving for 2 years. And so we're going to hold an election tonight. And so with the consent of the commission members, I'd like to put that on the agenda. So if anyone disapproves of that, let me know, and then we'll go forward with a consent on the part of the commission for that change.
All in favor?
Do we need a vote? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of changing the agenda to include the bylaws correction on officers, say aye.
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 All right, is council consent to the amended agenda? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so, and with that, we're gonna go ahead and move forward with new elections. And that was, an issue relating to the bylaws that was just discovered and really ironed out today. So if it catches some by surprise, I apologize for that. And so with that, we're gonna take nominations for the position of chair for the Plan Commission.
I nominate Vicky Luna as chair.
I can't serve again, thank you so much, but I can't serve again, because I've met my 2 years, so.
Okay.
And so with that, do I hear for a nomination for someone else, other than myself?
I nominate Nathan Howe.
I second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Nathan, did you accept that? You got it.
I saw the nod.
All right, are we ready to move forward then with the public hearing?
Vice Chair.
Yes,
So
so,
you have to nominate a vice chair.
Vice Chair.
Sorry.
yes, and for the position of vice chair, do we hear any nominations?
We could nominate Vicky Luna.
Second.
The second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and call the joint meeting of the CUP order. And I guess the first item is to hear from the applicant. And Nathan, I guess you're chair now, so forgive me if I forget. I apologize for that, but it's yours.
Yeah, we'll hear from the applicant and then go ahead and, since this is a joint meeting, I'm not sure about the protocol of the back and forth, but we'll go ahead and proceed with hearing from the applicant, public comment, and then once we close public comment, then we'll have discussion from both council and the planning commission. So go ahead and open the floor to the applicant. Applicant Franklin?
You here. Mr. Miller? I'm sorry, I'm a little hard of hearing.
Come on up.
Is that right? Thank you.
So it looks like you all have my presentation. Hi, my name is Terry Miller, 121 Irving Avenue, South Irving Avenue, here to talk about 10 North Irving Avenue. Just for my reference, do you all have physically this presentation in front of you?
Yeah.
You do, okay, thank you, thank you. Sorry Neil and the kids couldn't be here. Neil is speaking tomorrow at our son's school about what he does for a living. He's a statistician, has to present to 4-year-olds, so I think I actually got better into the deal. I want to thank the town manager for facilitating this meeting. I want to thank Mr. Shaw, the interim zoning administrator, for helping me understand this process of development of buildings. We've never done this before. And I also think it's very helpful. It signals that folks that are small and mid-level developers can actually get into this and help with the revitalization. I want to thank all of you for sharing these little boxes together. And I want to thank all of you who came to listen in person and online. So if we could move to the next slide. I sort of titled this what it was, sort of as a reminder. Originally, and I'm going to give a little bit of history on the building. As part of the survey of the downtown district for the historical designation, Virginia Department of Historical Resources did write-ups of a number of buildings. So I thought I would read off what they wrote about it in a positive way, and then I'll get to it a little bit later on in what it is now. So originally the building was constructed in 1940, that's the building on the left, as the volunteer fire department. In 1952, that second story was added to the firehouse when it was still the volunteer fire department. And that photo on the left shows you the original truck bays as they were, and then the photo on the right shows you as it's been filled in. According to the Virginia Department of Historic Resources, in the 90s, it was the police station, though I have some friends in the audience that think it may have preceded the 90s as the police station. And since then, it's sort of undergone a few different repurposes. One thing I want to note that you can see in this picture here, especially the one on the right, also the one on the left, is the one on the right. Can you tell the difference between Irving Avenue and the asphalt in front of our building? It's sort of hard. It's pretty much at stormwater level. Moving to the next slide, if we can. So what it was, what it is. I also thought I would read off what the Department of Historic Resources said about the building right now. Since its construction, the resource has undergone substantial alterations, including the addition of a second story, the infilling of the fire truck bays, conversion to standard doorways, and a one-story shed roof addition, that's the jail cells, current jail cells in the north elevation, all of which negatively affect the integrity of the building, its workmanship, its design, materials, and association. It has no known association with events that have made a significant contribution to broad patterns of history, nor is it associated with the lives of significant persons in the past. Final point of them, furthermore, the property does not embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, method of construction, nor is it the work of masters. So I want to focus on that point for a second. As I understand it from researching the building, the second floor and then the bump back, which is not shown in this picture, was actually constructed by the volunteer fire department. The joke that I've heard is great fighting fires, not engineers. So the building has some problems to it. I don't have a ton of pictures just for the purposes of this presentation, but the original first floor where the roof was, they put the second floor joists for the second floor right on top of it. And to brace it, they filled it in with cinder blocks and brick, many of which have fallen over. So the building has some problems. If we could move to the next slide. We are applying for the conditional use permit so that we can redevelop the building and adaptively reuse it to, it's about 82 years old, I think. We want to give it another 80 years or so, as much as we can, but it requires a lot of work. We're trying to stick within what the town is trying to do, the resort commercial district, which is creating that resort area where you can come, you can spend your time and do a lot of things, but we also need to create a viable business. We can move to the next slide. We already are on the next slide. So the picture on the left, that's what we saw the morning we closed, was the building flooding. We've got some stormwater management issues in the building. Everything from the back drains forward, it hits Irving, and then it comes into the building. Picture on the right, just as an example, maybe hard to see, but if you see where the wood hits the gray cinder block, you can see that it's not connected to the gray cinder block. It's pulled forth from the building. So if we could move to the next slide. The building requires a lot of work. It is not structurally sound and will not be a going concern going forward. It does flood on a regular basis. There's asbestos problems and lead-based paint problems. We are looking to preserve it as best that we can. The exterior part as well as the jail cell part, which is sort of on the right if you're looking at it. We're applying for this mixed use permit so that we can do a mix of residential and commercial. Primarily trying to keep the jail cells as a commercial tourist space open to the public on the right, and then residents on the left to pay the mortgage. Just for reference, the outside of the building is essentially cosmetic at this point. The brick and cinder block cannot really hold real weight. So we're going to have to build an entirely new metal skeleton inside the building, put a whole new floor joist system in to be able to support any weight. And then the outside, which we are looking to save, will be the same, but it can't support any sort of real weight for a second floor or even the downstairs floors. This is the fun part. The jail cells. So the jail cells were manufactured by Poly Jail Company. There are 3 of them. The picture on the left depicts all 3 in a row. The one on the right side of the picture, as I understand from stories, was the women's cell. I hear from stories from Miss Ellie that there was a certain woman that got locked up a lot and used to call out for her daddy through the vent there, and the back 2 cells were for the men. Each one of them has a bed, and the middle picture is a jail sink combination. We can move to the next slide. What we're looking to do is preserve those, clean them up, obviously, but make them a walkable tourist destination where people can come in from the street, whether you're in town for the day, whether you're in town for an actual destination, come in, get a little bit of history on the town, and maybe even get a little bit of history on the broader picture of what was happening around the U.S. at that time. A little bit of background on Poly Jail. They were founded in 1856 by P.J. Poly. He was a steamship repairman on the Mississippi on steamships, and he noticed all these pioneers and people moving west, and all these entrepreneurs cropped up to give them, to provide them services. And what Mr. Poly realized is that they need jails, portable ones. So he built these strap iron jails that you could put on the back of a wagon originally. Then eventually they started bolting them to the ground, and then eventually they started making 1 or 2 or 3 in a row, like we have here in Colonial Beach. And they were of such good quality that towns resold them over and over again. So ours are most likely, at the latest, they're from the early 1900s, because that's when they stopped making that pattern, but probably from the late 1800s, if not earlier. So not only do we want to highlight the history of the facilities themselves, but if you were to actually be on the inside, there's really interesting graffiti on the inside. Apparently when they locked people up, they allowed them to have sharp objects, because people carved all kinds of things on the insides of these cells, which we didn't even notice until after we closed. You can only see them with certain light, but if you get the right light, there's some interesting things that people carved, and so we want to bring some of that local history back out. The next slide is the exterior of the building. So we've got a little bit of an asphalt wasteland going on. What we'd like to do is add street lighting, landscape to work on the blight and the heat island effect with all the asphalt. We do have stormwater management problems. Everything from this picture drains forward. The water table is about 1 foot below the surface, so it's very hard to get water below the ground. There's not drainage on Irving Avenue, so we've got some things to deal with. But parking, we'll be able to add a lot of parking. We're looking at least 1 handicap spot, 5.5 parking spots, 4 golf cart spots, maybe in front. On the right of this picture is the alleyway between our building and the school board. We own the majority of that. We've been talking with Dotson Properties. They want to, work with us. We want to work with them so that they have access in that alley so that they can utilize parking behind the bank. So we want to help them get more parking on their side. And then on the next slide, I think what we're trying to do here aligns with the comprehensive plan. We're looking to create more off-season activities, tourism activities. We're definitely trying to preserve a historic building. Parking I just talked about, stormwater management. One place I'd like to pause for a minute and talk about is the handicap accessibility. There's a recommendation in the staff report. It's on page 3, number 4, and I've talked with Mr. Shaw about this, that the residential uses shall not be located in front of the building at grade level. The building at grade level is the only place that we can do a handicap accessible unit. You can't do it in the back, because if you dug it out to get a ramp in, and then if you have to build up on the inside for a ramp, you would essentially funnel all the stormwater into the building. We can't afford to do an elevator to the top. I'm asking you to not adopt recommendation number 4 for that reason, but also financially. We think that we're fitting within the space. I mean, there's residential on all sides of us at Doc's Motor Court, at the Yellow House next door. We have commercial on the right side of the building where the jail cells are. That's fully commercial. The left side of the building, we need the left side of the building to be productive to pay the mortgage so that we can have the right side of the building be that museum open tourist space that we're looking to create. I'd like to go back to Article 7. I looked over a lot of the codes to see where the zoning is, where everything lands. And I was looking at Article 7, Resort Commercial District, looking to create an attractive, viable resort. We're trying to create a viable business here. We need to create a viable financial business, and for that we need residential. I'd like to point out that the Dodson Properties, that's a multi-million-dollar organization, as I understand it, reached out to 20 or so businesses, brought them in, toured them around, and they were not able to attract many folks to actually sign on until maybe later on in their development phase. We're a family of 4. We can't pull anyone in. We can build. What we're trying to do is build for the now and make something as a building that we can convert maybe in the later when the market changes. So we've tried to design the plumbing and the electrical in such a way that it would be open to commercial redesign in the future. I'm not sure exactly what underpins number 4. If it's a desire for a look, we can achieve whatever look you want. Just tell us what that is and we can hit the mark. I'd like to also look at Article 16 about the zoning ordinance. It talks about conditional use permits. It talks about how these conditional use permits require individual consideration in many ways. Individual consideration for design, individual consideration for a particular location, individual consideration for what's appropriate in the time and the space. I'm asking you for individual consideration when it comes to number 4, to not impose number 4 right now. We can always convert it later. And then I think I have one more slide left, which is just to say, we think that what we're trying to do here fits with what folks that have come before us have already done. So Riverview has already done an amazing job. I have such an appreciation now for what it takes to actually put a building online, and we're not even close to being done yet. The Doc's Motor Court people are working. I mean, a lot of folks, small and mid-tier folks are working. So we're trying to get there too, and the flexibilities that you all may help provide so that small people can also come in, not just large organizations, is very much appreciated. I don't know, agenda-wise, if I stay up here or if I go sit down.
We'll go ahead and have public comment, and then after the staff presentation, after the public comment period, then we'll ask you to come back up and ask any questions or answer any questions from the general discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else that wanted to sign up to speak? We've got 3 speakers.
Ms. Oliver, do you have the email? We'll just go ahead and let you do that first.
Okay.
First, Mr. Rogers has got a email entries. Ms. Oliver, can you read that, please?
Mr. Rogers from 2 North Irving Avenue writes in, My name is Thomas Rogers. My family owns the property at 2 North Irving Avenue in the town of Colonial Beach and has for 5+ generations now. I am writing you in regards to having a commercial space at 10 North Irving and public parking lot between that property and ours. I have previously met and spoken with the new owners of 10 North Irving, and while I am pleased to see the old police firehouse restored and have a new life instead of being torn down and lost to history, I do have concerns about there being a commercial space in addition to the residential units. The town already has so many unused commercial spaces. I don't see the benefit to the town for more commercial units. My next concern is additional traffic on this section of North Irving, which has always been an issue with vehicles coming from Irving and Boundary and driving the wrong way on this one-way street. My final concern is having the need for a public parking lot between the old police station and my house because the old police department property does not have sufficient parking to accommodate residential and commercial parking. Having a parking lot against my property line will have people parking about 2 feet from my bedrooms because the house is set so close to the property line, which will surely intrude on the peace and quiet we enjoy, not to mention having headlights coming through our bedroom windows, and I'm sure we will also be picking up trash from said parking lot. We even offered to purchase the empty lot between our property and the old police station to try and prevent these issues and was told the town needs more public parking. I am already experiencing constant wet and swampy conditions on that side of the house that never existed until the Plotz building was torn down, which I have tried to address through Public Works and seems to have fallen on deaf ears. I hope you will take these concerns into consideration and thank you for your consideration on this matter.
Mr. Nelson? I'd like to remind everybody that we have a 3-minute time limit for public comment.
Eric Nelson, 1321 Lossing. I was the real estate agent that represented the purchasers of this property. I also was the agent that represented the sellers of the property. Many of you will probably remember that the sellers of the property were trying to use the building for a different purpose. And they encountered many of the same problems that the current purchasers are experiencing. But the problems that the sellers of the property were experiencing had to do with weight load on the second floor because of the pounds per square inch that was required for the use that they were going to be using it for. The residential use that is being considered now is, as I understand it, is much less of a pounds per square inch weight load requirement. So I think that the applicants are doing a really good job at trying to bring this building back to life in a way that is the best possible use considering the limitations that this building has. I also happen to be friends with these folks, and I know their style and the way that they will end up doing this project, and I feel very confident that it's going to be a wonderful addition to the community. So I enthusiastically support this conditional use permit application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Knuckles?
Good evening. My comments are more in a general sense about exceptions to areas that are zoned the way they're zoned now and the impacts of allowing exceptions to sort of the rules that you set up. We heard earlier a neighbor saying, like, I live there and this is causing, conflicts with my ability to sort of live in my home. My question, though, is as a concept, really, as you're thinking about not just this property, but thinking about as you're moving forward, usually if you have a commercial activity immediately adjacent to a residential, you often give some deference to the people that live there in a residential capacity as you're thinking about commercial activities that happen. So as you're adding sort of mixed use concepts to this parcel or really any of the ones in that part of town, are you going to treat the future residents that are going to be there as essentially moving to an attractive nuisance, and you sort of have you don't really have the same standing as somebody who would have been living in something that was originally designed as residential, because you kind of, you're living in this exemption sort of status, or are you going to treat them just as you would if they were flat out as a resident in a residential piece, which may have some unintended sort of ways of looking at our possibilities for redeveloping other parts of that part of town. So it's like, as long as you conceptually have a way of thinking about this as you're moving forward, there's nothing logically wrong about going in either direction, but I just wanted you to think about the implications of how you will treat those residents of the town once they live there and they come into future meetings and they say, oh, I now have a comment about this property or that property that are adjacent to where I now live in the town. Thanks.
Ms. Merlin?
Good evening, Michelle Merlin, 525 Irving. My full disclosure, my wife and I, Jenny, have known Terry and Neil since they bought their house here on Irving Avenue. Jenny was actually instrumental in convincing them to move here. They are great guys. They are passionate about this town. They've been wanting to invest in some type of project in this town for a few years now. And they decided to buy the building that Terry talked about. They're investing a lot of their time and their finances into making this a functional building, which it's not currently. And the whole idea and the concept of the jail setup, I think, is fantastic. We've had the pleasure of going in there with our flashlights and reading some of the comments that were in various cells. And I think there could be a whole history behind that could be explored, and a great tourist site for Colonial Beach. And I wanted to just share with you that Jenny and I both fully support Terry and Neil's request for the mixed use. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. Mr. Shaw, would you like to give a rundown of the staff recommendation, please?
Yes, but thank you, Mr. Howell. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologize. Is it on? No? You here? No, relight's on. I assume that it's functioning the way it's supposed to.
A little closer. Just get it really close to your mouth.
Oh, okay, I was too far away here. How about now? Is that any better? No, I'm sorry. Well, as you've heard from the applicant, Mr. Miller, he has identified a number of issues for zoning considerations. I want to point out that any instance whereby the development of this property, if it were to be approved by recommendation for approval and ultimately a decision by town council, it's incumbent upon Mr. Miller and his partner to adhere to all the provisions that are in the town of Colonial Beach zoning ordinance. So issues associated with parking, signage, and the Chesapeake Bay Act, the floodplain overlay district, the Bay Act provisions, and landscaping. So some of the provisions potentially that are found in parking requirements and some landscaping requirements potentially could serve to mitigate the impact on adjoining properties by providing screening from this use to the residential use that is adjoining this property. I would also like to comment that this particular use that is being proposed as a conditional use is something that is enumerated in the zoning ordinance as being a use permitted. And it's not just a circumstance that this use is contemplated, it is specifically identified in the ordinance as a conditional use. By contrast, a single-family residence is not. That is something that has been historically in the district, but as a practical matter, a single-family residence is not a permitted nor a conditional use in the resort commercial zoning district. So therefore, the nonconformity of the single-family residential use can remain, but by and large, my point being is that that use is actually a nonconformity, whereas what Mr. Miller is proposing with an approval of a conditional use permit would be a conforming use pursuant to this particular zoning district. And that's not to say that certainly somebody who has a residence couldn't continue to reside there, but I just want to point out that that particular use as a single-family dwelling is not something that is enumerated or listed as being permissible in the current zoning ordinance for the RC district. All right. So Having said that, my analysis is this is the applicant has done what he needed to do as it relates to provide a narrative and the application and paid the fee for his application for conditional use permit, so he's satisfied those requirements. The statutory requirements for public notice have been satisfied. And as it relates to what is being proposed here, it's my interpretation as the staff that this doesn't constitute something that potentially would be adversely affect the health and safety of persons residing and working in the neighborhood, and with appropriate conditions to potentially mitigate any types of impacts upon adjoining properties and the neighborhood. This use, I think, would be certainly something permissible and warranted to be used in this fashion by the applicant. I want to point out something else here as it relates to how it's the definition relates to this. A mixed residential commercial use is a building which provides commercial and office space together with one or more residential units. My point being, and I would like to point out, there's no mention in here in the definition of what constitutes a mixed residential or commercial use as having ground floor retail or commercial and upper floor residential. It only stipulates a building which provides commercial or office space together with one or more residential units. So consideration potentially about having a ground floor commercial and upper floor ground floor commercial and upper floor residential is certainly something that can be asked for as a condition, but there's nothing in here that constitutes a prohibition or mandates that would be the particular configuration relative to that definition that you find in the definition section 20-2 of the town zoning ordinance. I just want to make you aware of that. So having said all of that, the staff supports approval of this case and finds that the project to be a reasonable use of the property with minimal impacts to adjacent development and is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. With appropriate conditions, proposal should be harmonious with existing character of the general vicinity. Should the planning commission or town council consider this application appropriate for approval, staff proposes the following conditions. This condition use permit and all conditions listed below are for the mixed residential commercial use of the building located on tax map parcel number 382-2-75-10, also identified as 10 North Irving Avenue. This conditional use permit shall run with the land but may be revoked by the town of Colonial Beach or its designated agents in favor of the applicant or its assigned to comply with any of the listed conditions or any provision of local, state, or federal regulations as applicable. So there's also language in here that would be for the development of this, that Mr. Miller would have to conform to all of that applicable regulations. Number 2, external illumination on the parcel shall be shielded to direct light and glare onto their premises. Said lighting and glare shall be deflected, shaded, and focused away from all adjoining properties. 3, access to the residential portion of the mixed use shall be separated from the commercial use. And 4, this is the one that Mr. Miller is requesting to not be with consideration or a recommendation from the planning commission to the town council. That's something that is his prerogative, and the rationale of why that condition is in there is just principally for purposes of giving the appearance from the street level that this is something that does have, is a commercial use. It's not strictly something that somebody by appearance would interpret as being a residence. And improvements to the building and the site shall, number 5, shall be consistent with the general design guidelines and historic resort commercial area guidelines identified in the Colonial Beach design guidelines document. That is the extent of what I need to provide, or believe that I should provide to you. If you have questions for me, I'll try to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Yes, open the discussion of the planning commission.
Mr. Shaw, number 3, access to residential portion of the mixed use shall be separated from commercial use. I'm just curious if that That requires the applicant to have an existing door that can be entered and a stairway interior going up to the second floor apartment for the residential use.
I think that's what that contemplates, yes.
I'm sorry?
I believe that's what that language does contemplate, what you're
So
asking.
you're agreeing with what I said?
I am.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comment from the,
So in reference to that, does it have to be an external staircase, or can it be, if it's a separate entrance just inside the building, would that be a viable? Say,
It'd be internal.
right, an internal staircase that's only accessible, that only accesses the separate residential area, would that be sufficient?
Yes.
Ms. Luna?
I was curious about the commercial use. I know that the applicant spoke on that very briefly, but I wasn't clear if that, how much of the downstairs is committed to that commercial use and, what the plan is for that.
Ms. Miller, come back up. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. Sorry, can we go back to, Bob, to your question about the staircase?
Sure.
Yes.
I'm sorry, these are large, but they don't work very well. I think the question was about having an internal staircase to go upstairs.
My ears have the same condition, so I understand.
They hang low, but they don't work.
I'm concerned about it, Mr. Miller, because if you can't build outside the base, then you would probably have to use an existing door to get inside and then build a staircase up to the top. I haven't been inside the building, but from what I can see there, it's basically been, it's basically been gutted.
Yes.
So you probably have to build a stairway that was walled off from the rest of the commercial area. And is this what you intend to do?
So the commercial area being
Down ground floor?
the ground floor to the right where the jail cells are, there's a door in front already. We would just reuse that door. And there's currently between the red brick portion and the jail cells, there is a doorway open that would be walled off. So the residential on the left would have its own entrances and the commercial on the right would have its own separate entrance. To your question about how do you get upstairs, a stairway on the back of the building. If we build an interior staircase, we will effectively lose an entire residential unit, which doesn't make the building viable.
I understand. So the stairway is going to be inside the building?
On the exterior back of the building. And that'll,
I mean, hanging on the exterior of the existing wall?
well, I don't think it'll actually attach to the wall. I think it has to be separate, the back wall. The wall, the picture I showed you where the joists are pulling out, that's the back wall. So it's not sound. The stairway will be its own structure. It would be on the back where the parking lot is towards the Methodist church. And it would come up from the window on the back of the jail cells up to the exterior window towards the yellow house, the folks that sent in the letter. We would cut that window out into a door. And then you would enter the upstairs through the back.
Okay, so that doesn't fill in the category of extending the walls of the building?
I don't believe it does. I could be wrong. This is my first time doing this, but I don't think it does.
Yeah. Okay, well, I hope that's right.
Sorry, Ms. Luna.
Yes, I have two questions. One is, how much space is going to be dedicated to the commercial? And you mentioned the residential units. How many residential units is in your?
So I think the jail cells technically are about 350 square feet. What they did on the back side of them though, for the sink toilet combination that I showed in the picture, is that there's a whole plumbing run behind them, which is wasted space. It's like 2 foot wide, but they welded all the plumbing in so you couldn't escape through the toilet, basically. So that's, I mean, maybe 350 square feet, but you can't really use that part of it. So it's somewhat less than that. The residential, I will tell you right now, we are having real trouble with budget. Everything is coming in very expensive. We were originally trying to budget 350,000. Our first budget, our first cost estimate, because of supply chain issues, et cetera, came in at 700,000. So we are probably going to have to go from 4 units to 3 because we just can't. And I'll tell you, what we're trying to do is create housing options that are flexible, that are for people that may be short-term, but we're also trying to create housing options for people that want to live there. Like these kitchens are not just kitchenettes with a microwave. They're hopefully more than that. So that if there are folks from Dahlgren that want to rent long-term or people that just want to live there, the facilities will be there. The problem we're running into is that it's really expensive right now. So what we're trying to do is we're going to unfortunately probably have to end up putting a lot into the walls, the plumbing, the electrical, so that we can build what the market supports now, what we can afford now, and then in the future, hopefully when things improve or when the market here changes, we can flex up with that.
So when you say 3 units, 2 would be upstairs and then 1 would be down?
Actually, the opposite. 2 downstairs because the front unit is the only place we can do that handicap spot, the handicap accessible unit. 1 in the back on the ground floor, and then upstairs would be 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. This is where we are now with the budget, and then sort of storage office space for the jail cells.
How do you intend to operate the jail cells, as far as hours and availability, walk-in, how is that gonna in your mind to be executed?
Right. I mean, we do expect it to be somewhat seasonal. There's just so much foot traffic lately, and seeing what's there and what people could just walk up and see, we want to make that available. So probably this time of year, we wouldn't have that open unless it was like a special event or something. But in the summer, what we'd like to have it is that it is open during acceptable business hours, whatever that is. It is something where we're trying to use the money from the residences to pay the mortgage so that we can keep that part open. So there's a little bit of give and take on that. We'd like to do it in tandem with the other attractions around town, like the museum. So for example, what their hours, what their times of the year may be, will probably look like that too.
On that subject, do you envision someone in attendance when it's open? The jail?
An attendance?
Someone in an attendance?
Oh, yes, yeah, well, yes. So those sink toilets actually go for about $10,000 on eBay. So we need somebody there to make sure they don't get stolen. They don't make them anymore, but yes, we would imagine someone in it. Yes, someone will be on site. That's what we're envisioning. We want to make sure that someone's handling parking, someone is handling people coming in and out. What I would envision is one of the cells to be perfectly clean, like a museum, with a lot of things, historical memorabilia, pictures from around town. And then the back 2 cells, I'm not sure which one. We have to figure out the lighting, but all that graffiti on the inside, people love to take pictures, right? I mean, they want to take Instagram pictures, they want to post things. And some of those cells would be really amazing to take those kinds of pictures, like you got locked up or whatever. All the doors work. They've got the trays for your food, for your drink. There's some interesting pieces in there, but we've got to figure out how to highlight it.
I had a follow-up question about the ADA compliant bathroom.
Yes.
And that's a requirement for commercial space, so it would be needed at any rate, even if there were no residential downstairs.
Because we're, as I understand it, because we are a historical renovation, because the building is what it is, we originally tried to actually do, what we originally wanted to do was use the jail cells as part of the residence, because there's some hotels out there that are converted prisons where the bathroom is the jail cell. We couldn't do that because of ADA requirements. We can't get the coverage. So we need to do it in one of the residences. The downstairs front one is the only one we could make it fit. Yeah, I don't know.
I was just curious, we have really looked at the commercial aspect of that very carefully. And, if it would be possible to put that commercial in front and then have the residential in the back. So you have commercial in the front and then, accommodations in the back.
Right.
And I understand that the bathroom has to go in the front because of the water table issues, but that would address the need for having a lively place that looks inviting and something that would be a commercial opportunity for some business down the road.
It can be an opportunity down the road, and that front unit is the only place that you can get access, handicap access, without flooding the first floor. Just with the way that the grade slopes in back, you can't do it in back. So in the future, we can convert the front unit to commercial, but there's no market for it right now. I'll just be honest about it.
So it's market driven and not necessarily because of the issue of placement of the bathroom with regard to the water table.
Well, it's all that. We can't put handicap anywhere else. The water table, so just for reference, I didn't include a picture of it, but we had to drill 3 holes. Oh, good, you have the picture. We had to drill 3 holes in the foundation to see how strong it was at various points, front, middle, and back. So we've got these 3 holes and we can see how deep the water table is. They're about 3 feet deep. It's always about just a foot below the surface. Like there's water all the time. So we can't really do a lot to get the water below ground. We certainly can't do much in back to keep the water from flowing in if we dug it out for handicap access. So we can always convert that front unit later, but there's not a market right now for a commercial space. I mean, we're just a family of 4. If the Dodson properties couldn't bring anyone in, we can't bring anyone in. I don't know if that answers your question though.
I think I get what you're talking about there, but I've got a couple of other questions in reference. So the parking for the building, you talked about parking behind the building.
Yes.
Is that the parking for the residents? And any commercial parking? Is that the only parking? Is the space behind the building? I'm just trying to orient myself with the parking situation
Right.
for that.
So yes, in the back, we have, we're gonna try to do 1 handicap spot right on the back of the building because that would be the easiest slope down to the front of the building and adjacent to the building. In the very back, next to the church parking lot, we can get about 4.5 spots in. I say 4.5 because there's one that slices with the Dodson properties. We'll work with them on figuring that out. And then in front right here, we do have to, stormwater does come into the front of the building right here. It drains not only from our properties, but also it comes down Boundary. It hangs a left at Irving. And it comes to on our side of Irving and it can't get across because Irving is crested. So we have to do something to not only get water below ground, we've got to do something to make maybe a small barrier to keep the water from coming in. But I think in front, the very front bottom left of this picture would be where we can get 3 to 4, at least golf cart spots in there. With sort of a golf cart parking lot on top with as much drainage mitigation as we can do underneath it, like sort of a twofer.
Okay. And so also, so the access to the rear lot, is it to the right of the jail cells, to the right of the building or to the left of the building?
It's to the right in this picture.
Okay.
The left is the Klotz property, which runs just about 2 feet to the side of our building.
Mhm.
You can't really see the pole there, but it's basically to the side of our building, so there's no legal access there, but it's being used right now. The alley, we owned 3/4 of it, and we've already talked with the Dodson properties. They'd like an easement so that they can know that they can use it to get back to their property. We're totally open to that. Their success is our success. We're all trying to work on this together.
Yeah,
But you would access the parking back through that alley, yeah.
okay.
And I had one last question about the stormwater mitigation. What are the plans for that? And you know, the lot is so, it's like 90% permeable, I mean,
Yes.
pervious, so impervious. And so, I mean, like you said, water's coming right through the front. How are you gonna be able to address that?
It's tough. So the foundation put on the puddles and plants, which put me in touch with the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program, VCAP. And I've been working with them. They've come out and done site surveys. I mentioned that we dug those holes in the foundation and the water table's so high. The water table is so high, we can't do anything under the ground, basically, like irrigation pits, deep dry wells, they'll all immediately fill with water. So they're just not available to us. So what we can try to do is we're going to try to do a lot of permeable pavers in the front. So in front of the jail cells, a section of permeable pavers. In front of the front part of the red brick building, permeable pavers. That'll get us so far. In the back, I think we can do a dry swale that'll catch a lot of water. I mean, I've talked with the Dodson Properties about what they intend to do. Frankly, I'd like to talk with you all about what you intend to do with the Klotz property because you're draining onto our property. And I can't do anything about that water. There's only so much that we can take down into the ground because of the water table. I mean, with the roof water, we could try to do an enormous cistern to catch that. But what's really driving the water is not what's coming off the roof, it's what's coming off the entire back of those three properties that used to be one. And they're all draining towards Irving. And then it hits Irving and there's nowhere for it to go. So it's coming back into our building. I mean, we'll do whatever the town wants to do to try to mitigate it. I would prefer that this be a property that's exemplary of green, but with the water table being so high, there's only so much that we can do. So I think, to answer your question, I think dry swale in the back, I think we can catch a lot that way. Permeable pavers in the front. The golf cart parking in front, we can do a deep drainage pit, drainage grade gravel, 38 gravel. I think that can catch a lot too. But the problem is that when the water backs up on Irving and it comes up to our property, I can't do anything about what's coming down the boundary, you know?
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Do we have any additional conditions above and beyond staff recommendations that we'd like to put forward to the council?
I don't know that it's an additional condition, but I have no issue with allowing a current handicap residential access on the front of the building that would eventually be turned into a business access on the front of the building when the business opportunity comes around. I think, especially considering that's the only place where that kind of ADA access is truly viable at this point, I have no objection to allowing that.
Any other recommendations? No? So I'm going to make a motion to adopt staff recommendations without number 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 5. Do we have a second?
Second.
Let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
And I'm opposing it because I think that we absolutely need to follow the precedent that was set with the Dodson CUP, where commercial is downstairs and in the front. I understand the constraints financially, but I think that we want to make downtown a lively place that is a place that, you know, you can go to and there's activities and, you know, that's part of, I think, the mission of Main Street, to look at, you know, revitalizing downtown. And by turning it into possibly short-term rentals, I think that's going against what, you know, we've talked about, so.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Linda. So at this point, the Planning Commission recommends to council adoption of staff recommendations without number 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 5.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's have discussion before I have a motion on it then. That sounds good. All right. I'll open it up for, for questions and any follow-up that anybody has after that. I don't know if Mr. Miller might need to come back or not. Okay. Anybody on this side have any further questions this time? Yes.
So Mr. Shaw, as I understand it, the building to the right of this building, which is one of the Dotson properties,
Yeah.
they didn't have to go for a CUP on that because it was going to be totally residential.
Something that constitutes a use by right, which is a bed and breakfast.
Okay, so is a multifamily unit by right? You said single family was not.
Correct.
So is multifamily by right in this district?
I don't believe it is, but I'd have to look at the ordinance. I'm not sure. Myself.
Okay, so if it was short-term or long-term residential only, and there was no commercial component, it would not be by right.
Multifamily isn't even a viable use in resort commercial, period.
Okay, Okay.
I-
so the reason the Dotsons got approved is because it's a bed and breakfast type.
That's correct. And that's the reason it is, because it is specifically enumerated as a use by right. I don't think that any residential use other than mixed residential is permissible in the RC district. And if it's multifamily, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you can call me on it, but I'd have to look back at the ordinance, but I don't believe that's identified either as use by right or conditional use by that district.
That's correct. I just had it on my phone. I'm not just texting people. I brought those. Sorry.
I'll vouch for it. Okay, that's all I have for right now, yeah.
Yeah. I have some major concerns about not doing number 4. I think that, I can understand, maybe not doing the whole first floor, but I think locating residential at the street level within this district is very important to the viability of the district. And we want it to grow to be what we think it should be, the vision of that, then I have real concerns about the front of the building not having a storefront on it, because I think that prime example of that is we have on Hawthorne Street, where next to Riverview Inn, and we have a residential with a storefront on it, but it's a residential use right now, and it looks vacant. It doesn't add value to the district. And so, I understand Mr. Miller's point about, accessibility for handicap, but there is a side, if you look at the picture of the existing, there's a blocked-in window on this side here that has a lintel that would be at ground level on the side of the building that could provide handicap accessibility to a first floor unit that isn't, sorry, this thing. A good example of this would, working is the building on Wilder that's behind Nancy's Ice Cream that has just 2 little offices in the front and then a residential use in the back, and then there has 3 apartments above it. And part of what's unattractive about it is the fact that it doesn't have any commercial storefront to it. And that's part of what's ugly about it, other than grass growing up, probably. But when it was the fire department and it had those big openings in it and a sign, commercial sign, when it was the police department, it had an awning, those commercial aspects that help dress the building up. Sure, Mr. Miller, come on up.
I share your views. Until we went to the budgeting process, To open up the truck bays, again, which is what we wanted to do, is $50,000. To add an awning is $10,000. To open up, to cut the brick into the door you mentioned, we looked at that too. That's thousands of dollars. Apparently brickwork is unbelievably expensive. We're trying to make this happen. It's just, if we want this building to be a going concern, we have to recognize what the financial constraints are right now of anyone that would come in. And if small-time developers like us can't do it, that's fine. If it's only big-time developers like the Dotson Group, then that's what it is. But this building will not be a going concern unless somebody, whether it's us or somebody else, does something with it now, or it will be like Klotz. I'm not trying to pressure you into a decision. We could sell the building at a financial loss and just walk away, and with a lot of pain and heartache, because this has been a lot of work. But the building, we have to recognize what can we do with it now? What can we do with it now to save it?
No
So that
offense, Mr. Miller, but there are alternative solutions to that. Because you can do a first floor live work unit that's handicap accessible and get your residential piece out of it and still get your commercial storefront. There are alternatives
We don't have any renters that are going to come in for that.
that are gonna rent a live workspace.
Yes.
I find that hard to believe in this rental market. I have several rentals and the list is a mile long. I honestly.
If it's about a look, which is what I've heard, we can achieve whatever the look is that y'all want. But we're trying to create a space that for now we can pay the 2 mortgages. We have one now to buy it.
You know what a live work unit is?
I think I do, but
It's an apartment with an office in it.
right. I mean, just the way that the building is cut up, we're trying to do 2 units downstairs, which it doesn't allow for an office.
How many bedrooms per unit?
Two one bedrooms downstairs and 2 bedrooms upstairs.
The first floor of the building is 2,400 square feet, is that right?
I think it's
1,200 square
I think
feet.
it's 1,200.
So each unit is gonna be 600 square feet.
Well, and then we have to take the walls in too to put up the skeletal structure.
550.
We did try to reach out to businesses to see, because I mean, frankly, so we also, just for reference, we went through the process with the historical tax credit people, because we thought that was going to be an attractive route, and they basically wanted to leave everything exposed, the roof, the walls, which has asbestos and lead-based paint and everything. It would be a great building for somebody that could do a commercial like that. I think it'd be a great brewery or an art gallery or something like that. We just can't make that happen at the moment. So we're trying to do what we think the market can bear at the moment so that we can get through the next number of years to then hopefully when there's more development, there are more people in town, there's just more going on, then we can get to that future state of I mean, what we think the zoning is trying to get to is
Do you
that
have a
resort
floor
plan.
plan?
We have a draft, which we couldn't afford. It would help. I can send it to you. It's a draft, but originally we had 4 one-bedrooms, and then that came in at $700,000.